When people talk about the beginning of the world, they often point to Europe, Asia, or even America. But the real story of human life does not begin in those places. It begins in Africa. This is the truth that many schools, books, and even movies do not always tell in full. Africa is not just one of the continents on the map. It is the home of the very first people. It is the mother of all nations, the root of human bloodlines, and the first land where man stood upright and walked. Scientists who study human history, called archaeologists and anthropologists, have found bones and tools buried deep in the soil of Africa. These are not ordinary bones. They are the remains of the first humans who lived millions of years ago. One of the most famous discoveries was in Ethiopia. It was a skeleton named Lucy, more than 3 million years old. Lucy showed the world that the first humans did not come from Europe or America, but from Africa. Later discoveries in Kenya, Tanzania, and South Africa gave even more proof. This is why Africa is often called the cradle of mankind. The early humans of Africa had dark skin. This was not by accident. The hot sun of Africa is very strong, and dark skin acted like natural protection. It helped people live under the burning sun without their bodies being destroyed. This means that black skin is not just a color, it is a strength, a gift of survival that made it possible for humans to last on the land where life began. But the story of black people is not only about survival. It is about creation, intelligence, and deep connection to the earth. Early Africans learned how to make fire, how to shape stones into tools, and how to hunt animals and roots. They also learned how to farm, plant crops, and take care of animals. They painted on caves, leaving behind pictures that told stories of their lives. These paintings show that African people were not primitive, as some history books wrongly say. They were inventors and teachers who laid the foundation for human progress. Long before the rise of Europe, long before Asia built empires, Africa already had life, knowledge, and culture. In Egypt, the Nile Valley saw the building of pyramids, the study of stars, and the making of one of the first writing systems. In West Africa, people built trading routes across the Sahara Desert, carrying gold, salt, and wisdom. In South Africa, communities farmed the land and lived in harmony with nature. Africa was already alive, strong, and wise, while the rest of the world was still learning. This is the part of history many people do not know or are not told. The real origin of black people is not about slavery, poverty, or weakness. It is about being the first, the original, the root of all human life. To know this truth is to see Africa not as a land that was discovered by others, but as the land that discovered life itself. When we look back at Africa, it is not only about bones and caves. Africa also built some of the greatest kingdoms the world has ever seen. These kingdoms show that black people were leaders, builders, and thinkers long before the world even knew the meaning of civilization. But sadly, many of these stories were hidden or told in a way that made them look small. The truth is much bigger. One of the earliest and most powerful civilizations was ancient Egypt. The pyramids still stand today, and nobody fully understands how they were built. These giant structures were not just tombs for kings. They were proof of knowledge in science, mathematics, and engineering. The Egyptians studied the stars and created one of the first calendars. They developed medicine and could even perform surgeries. They invented writing systems that spread ideas from generation to generation. All this came from Africa. Far away from the Nile, in West Africa, there were kingdoms like Mali, Ghana, and Songhai. These places were rich, not only in gold and salt, but also in knowledge. The city of Timbuktu in Mali became a famous center of learning. People traveled from far countries just to study there. It had one of the largest libraries in the ancient world, filled with books about science, philosophy, and law. Black scholars, teachers, and poets wrote ideas that influenced the world. In South Africa, there was Great Zimbabwe, a city made of stone walls so strong that they still stand today. These walls were built without cement, yet they have lasted for hundreds of years. This shows that African builders had skills that amazed even travelers who saw them. In Central Africa, the Kingdom of Congo built a strong system of trade and governance. Leaders there understood politics, trade, and how to manage large communities. In Ethiopia, the Kingdom of Aksum became one of the earliest Christian empires in the world, trading with Asia and the Middle East. These kingdoms and empires show that Africa was never empty or backward. It was full of life, intelligence, and greatness. Black people were not waiting to be discovered. They were already creating, already leading, already ruling. So why is this history often left out? Because during colonization, powerful nations wanted to control Africa. To do that, they had to break the pride of Black people. They told lies that Africa had no history, no knowledge, and no greatness. But the truth is different. Africa was rich, powerful, and advanced. The origin of Black people is not only about being the first humans. It is also about being the first to build, the first to trade, the first to write, and the first to teach. This is the story that was never told in full. Even though Africa was the root of human life and the home of strong kingdoms, its story was almost destroyed. This happened during the time of slavery and colonization. These dark periods changed the way people saw Black people, and many lies were told to hide the real truth. During the transatlantic slave trade, millions of Africans were taken away from their homes. Men, women, and children were forced onto ships and carried to America, the Caribbean, and Europe. They were treated as if they were not human, only as workers to be used. But the slave traders did not only steal people, they also stole history. They made sure the children born in foreign lands did not know their true roots. They told them Africa was only a land of wild animals, hunger, and darkness. They hid the story of the great kingdoms, the scholars, the builders, and the inventors. Later came colonization, when European countries divided Africa among themselves. They ruled the land, took its wealth, and forced Africans to follow foreign laws. But more than this, they controlled knowledge. They wrote history books that praised their own leaders but kept quiet about African kings and queens. They made Africa look like it was always poor and powerless, even though the opposite was true. This is why many people today think the history of Black people begins with slavery, but that is not true. The history of Black people begins with the first humans, with strong skin under the African sun, with pyramids, with gold traders crossing the desert, with libraries filled with wisdom. Slavery and colonization were interruptions, painful interruptions, but they could not erase the truth completely. Even in slavery, Africans held on to parts of their culture. They carried songs, stories, and dances across the seas. These traditions gave them strength, and even today, you can see African culture in music, food, and language all over the world. Black people did not forget who they were. Their roots were too deep. What they never told you is that the attempt to erase African greatness was not an accident. It was planned. If you take away a people's history, you take away their pride. If you take away their pride, you can control them. But the truth has a way of coming back. Archaeology, old writings, and oral traditions continue to reveal the real story of Black people. Africa was never without history. Black people are not defined by slavery. They are defined by being the first, the builders, the survivors, and the creators of life itself. Today, when we look at the world, we see Black people everywhere, in Africa, in America, in Europe, in the Caribbean, and beyond.